So in the last section we talked about HTML and CSS in mobile web development. So now I'd like to talk about JavaScript and jQuery, which is a JavaScript library. So what you should know, what you really need to know to proceed in this series is just inline and linking JavaScript documents. So how to include a JavaScript into an HTML document, the basic fundamentals, variables, loops, arrays, and then functions and methods. You should have an understanding of those basic programming fundamentals. And if you have experience in another language, then that's fine, because variables, loops, and arrays pretty much work relatively the same way in most languages. What is good to know is jQuery, jQuery Mobile, JavaScript and jQuery events, as well as object-oriented programming. So what role does JavaScript play in mobile web development? Well, JavaScript is basically the brains of the operation. Like I said a few times, HTML is used to display the data, CSS is used to style the data, and JavaScript is used to perform calculations and anything like that. Execute APIs, make decisions, conditional statements, and it gets the data ready to insert into the HTML. JavaScript has libraries and frameworks that allow us to create a nice user interface for mobile apps. And what role does jQuery play? Well, jQuery can be used for just about all of our user interface, jQuery Mobile that is, buttons, backgrounds, input fields, links. jQuery Mobile has great documentation that show us examples of each aspect, so it's pretty easy to implement. This includes both JavaScript and CSS, and we can make AJAX calls using jQuery. So this is just some really quick JavaScript basics. This is a variable, so we can assign a variable with var and name it. So this variable's name is name, and we're assigning the string Brad to that variable. And you actually don't need the var at the beginning. You could just have it as name equals Brad. Alright, so here's an array. We're defining an array in a variable named fruit. So we just want to say new array, and then we can input our array values, because an array is essentially just a variable that holds multiple values. Here's a function, so to declare it, this should be lowercase, we have to just use the word function and then give it a name where we need parentheses, which can take parameters if it needs to, and then we have the curly braces, and whatever we want to do when this function is called need to go in between these curly braces. Here we're just giving an alert that says hello. Loops, here's a basic for loop. So we have the for function or method, and we have three parameters here. The first, we're assigning I, the variable I, to 0. The second, we're saying if I is less than 10. Okay, so if I is less than 10, then do whatever's in this block. And we're also incrementing it through each iteration. So it'll run and it'll be I will equal 0. The next iteration will be 1, and then 2, 3, all the way up to 9. The reason it would go to 9 is because we're saying if I is less than 10. We could say if I is less than or equal to 10, which would bring it to 10. And all we're doing is document.write, which just writes out to the screen the number or whatever the I variable is through that iteration. jQuery basics, this is a selector, so the $ is actually the jQuery function. We could also use the word jQuery, but most developers just use the $. And then in our parentheses we have the selector that we want to grab. In this case we're getting an ID of content. Alright, and the ID is because of the pound sign. If we wanted to grab a class called content, we could use the dot. And we don't need to use custom selectors. We could use a paragraph, so this would pertain to all paragraphs. We could put an A in there. This would pertain to all links. And we could also do like A with the class of, say, red or something like that. And then we can perform methods and actions on these on this data that we select. Here we're calling the hide method, which would just hide the whatever is in the div content. Here we're using HTML, so we can insert whatever we want into this content div in between the parentheses. So this particular piece of code would insert this string, this sentence, into the content div. We can also do events. So right here we're grabbing a button. We're not specifying an ID or class, so this pertains to all buttons on the site. And we're saying .click. So if the button's clicked, we want to run a function. Now this is it doesn't have a name. This is a self-calling function, and what it will do is hide all of the paragraph tags on the page. All right, and slow is just a parameter we can use. We can use slow and fast or whatever the speed that you want the paragraph to be hidden. jQuery Mobile is touch-optimized web framework. It's cross-platform, so it'll run on any kind of device. It's compatible with PhoneGap. It's built on top of jQuery Core. It's a theming framework. It has custom themes. You can develop custom themes, or you can actually use a pre-made theme right out of the box. It's HTML5 driven. Ajax powers the navigation, so you have a nice navigation system, and how the page will just fade in, so it's really nice. And there's different kind of user interface widgets you can use, like sliders and tabs, and it's really nice. So this is a jQuery Mobile boilerplate, which is just a starter template kind of. You could use this to start your jQuery Mobile projects. It's just basically we have an HTML file. We have to include the style. Well, we don't have to include this style sheet. This is optional if you want to use the pre-made themes. We're just pointing to jQuery.mobile minimum CSS. So this is the minified version, which just means it doesn't have comments and spacing and stuff like that. But that's optional. We're including regular jQuery here, and here we're including jQuery Mobile. So you can use a CDN like we are here. This is a remote site that we're getting this from. Or you could just download the jQuery files, put them in your own server, your own app or file structure, and point to them locally. In the body, we have three areas, three data roles. So a page is basically a page, a whole page. And then we have the header, data role equals header. We have the content, where all the basic main content goes. And then we have a footer, where any footer text or anything like that can go. So it's really helpful in just getting a quick framework and UI. So that's it for this section in this chapter. In the next chapter we'll be actually looking into PhoneGap, because we haven't talked about it much, and we'll just look at an overview, and then we'll deal with some of the features that PhoneGap offers.